It is Friday, May 27th. Let's talk PlayStation. Alright everyone, welcome back. We've got a lot of stuff to go over from this past week, so first up, as usual, our PS Plus reminder. Make sure you grab those May games before they go away. The big news, of course, this week, at least initially, was that the new PS Plus relaunched in Asia territories, excluding Japan, and that's where we did 2 videos already, looking at, well, first it was Oddworld Abe's Odyssey. That was the first PS1 game that showed up on the PSN store to buy individually, and so we looked at that game and also the new classics menu that Sony put on these PS1 games, PS1 and PSP games, I should say, and that's where we looked at the, the rewinds, save states, the video presets, all that stuff. And then the following day, we looked at the proper relaunch on the Malaysia store, and that's where we, subscribed to Deluxe, looked at the catalog, more PS1 games, talked about trophies, 50 Hz PS1 games, did some comparisons to PS3, PS1 disc emulation, and all that good stuff. So we don't really have to repeat a lot of that here, but go watch those if you missed it. And we can cover up some extra details that Sony did outline on the PlayStation blog via a new PS Plus FAQ. And that's where we have confirmation of at least, something like the DRM policies for these games. So when it comes to PS Plus Extra, Premium, and Deluxe, that will require an online check-in once every 7 days, which isn't really all that surprising. This is a subscription-based model, so of course there is going to be a hard requirement to check back in and prove that you're still an active member. But there's that, and we also learned that for downloadable or add-on content, that's still not included when you're streaming a game. You can download a game and then use DLC or add-on content, but when you're streaming something, PS4 or most notably PS3, where that's your only option, no DLC at all for those games. In the short term, that's obviously a pain and disappointing, but also in the short term, one where likely isn't going to affect a lot of people, considering that most people do not like to stream their games. So it's a reality of the situation, but at the very least, you would hope that Sony is at least trying to make attempts to make their streaming functionality better, and that's not the case here. Now, one of the big problems that was noticed almost right away when it came to the new PS Plus relaunch was the upgrade process if you're, say, already a PS Plus Essential subscriber, because we knew ahead of time that you could just pay the difference and upgrade to either Extra or Deluxe in this case. The thing is, though, in that circumstance, there's people notice that because some folks would, buy PS Plus on discount, either from the PS Store when Sony runs a sale, which is, rare, but they do it, or you could buy discounted PS Plus cards from certain retailers or whatnot, and instead of paying the full price, you could get a year for, 10-20% off. And people noticed that when they went to go upgrade to Extra or Deluxe, they actually had to pay that full difference, not quite the difference of the standard MSRP price of what PS Plus is for a year. As in, they're taking away your discount that you got, however long ago, which is a really weird, strange, and bad circumstance for Sony, where they already catch a lot of heat for, some of the things they've been doing lately throughout this entire generation, and they're looking very greedy. So that happened, and then it also got fixed pretty swiftly. So I think it was the following day where we had confirmation from the Ask PlayStation Twitter account, where it says, and I quote here, "Due to a technical error, players in Asia who have purchased a PlayStation Plus membership at a discount have been incorrectly charged for their upgrade pricing. This error has been fixed, and impacted players will receive a credit. We thank you for your patience." Now that's good to see, but with this being over, I'm seeing some ask, was this really a technical error? Just based on what Sony's done previously with PS5, and by and large they certainly deserve a lot of criticism for many things they've done in the past, but I would figure this was a genuine mistake in that, well, just seeing how it played out and based on the circumstance, it seems like what they did was make some sort of prorate calculation system on price paid instead of what should be local MSRP, because if they're trying to do a system where it's a one size fits all by price paid to launch it in multiple territories, that's the issue, is that PSN can see if you buy PS Plus at a discount. They can also see if you buy a PS Plus card at retail, and sometimes those cards at discount have different SKUs. So they can see, and that's where the oversight comes into play, right? It should be based on the local MSRP for 1 year of PS Plus. That way it ignores any sort of errors like this. You got to keep in mind, they don't want to, the whole point of this, 3-tier system is to get you to pay more, right? So they're not going to try and retroactively take away discounts when they're already going to get their goal of you subscribing up from Essential, right? So it just seems silly to think that this was on purpose. That, and also I'm seeing plenty of people in finance departments at other companies say like, oh yeah, it totally seems like an error or a huge oversight on whoever was responsible for setting the prorate calculation system. But anyway, there was that, and then we still have one other issue, which is that for some folks that stack up years of PS Plus, we were wondering what would happen when it comes to upgrading that, and we have confirmation they want the full price up front as well if you choose to go to extra or premium or deluxe. So if you stacked 5 years of plus, you have to pay 5 years of the difference to go up to a higher tier, which means perhaps hundreds of dollars. There's no option in place to say size down the timeline of your membership for a higher tier, or only subscribing to deluxe for, let's say, a year and then you still have essential after that. So there's nothing like that just yet. But this is the benefit to having a soft launch in certain territories before you get to Japan, USA, Europe. So maybe they'll have something in place by then. But for now, that's what happened this past week. Another PS Plus controversy, and I'm sure it won't be the last. But with that said, let's move on to more positive PS Plus news. So some users in Hong Kong noticed when surfing the new PS Plus menu that they spotted Regina from Dino Crisis being used as promotional material for the Classics game catalog. And that's really exciting because we didn't know that game was coming, but this more or less confirms it, right? So that's great to see. Another beloved PS1 classic getting the proper treatment on PS4 and PS5, where so far at least the emulation looks really good, barring the 50 Hz decision, but still, that's great to see. And mind you, we still have to remember that there's going to be a difference between regions. Some games may show up and others may not, depending on the territory. And we do expect that by the time the service hits Japan, North America, Europe, that the library will be much bigger, but that's partly due to PS3 games. So even if the Classics lineup is skimpy, at least it's something where every month we should be getting new titles, and it's more about what they do over time, not necessarily on day one. As long as we don't really have kind of an NSO situation, I think we'll be okay, but again, we'll see. However, one other classic game that kind of leaked in the same manner that we saw before the formal announcement of PS Plus of the new relaunch is that Resistance Retribution was rated in Korea. And that's really exciting because I love that game. It's a fantastic Resistance game on PSP that I feel a lot of people didn't actually get the chance to play because it kind of came, close to late life cycle PSP, and maybe that's where a lot of people dropped off and stopped buying a lot of PSP software. But the great news here is that is a Ben Studio game, and trophies are optional, but Ben did do trophies for Siphon Filter, so perhaps we'll have Resistance Retribution on PS4 and PS5 with full trophy support. And just the idea of that, I am salivating. That seems so awesome. Believe me, I'm so happy that I was partly wrong about the trophy mandate, right? It's not mandated, but still a pleasant surprise that some games can have it if developers want to go ahead and do it. Now, another game that got rated in Korea was kind of a small title. You may have heard of it, was God of War Ragnarok. And so that's good news, obviously. That's great to see. And I don't know about you, but that more or less solidifies for me that this game is on track to release this year. Games don't get rated unless they're coming out relatively soon. So unless something catastrophic happens, we're probably getting the game this year, and that's good. I mean, the running theory was October, September, somewhere around there. I think that's what was on the PSN backend was September, which could very well be a tentative release date or something, but whatever, it's somewhere around there. It's just that, remember, if they were bold enough somehow to say 2021 back during during the second PlayStation showcase in 2020, I mean, if they were bold enough to say that, they couldn't have been so far off to where the game doesn't come out until 2023. But even if that were the case, it would be likely what Horizon saw, a delay into Q1, which isn't the worst wait in the world. But now it's more a matter of, when are we going to see more? And could it be a new PlayStation showcase around the E3 timeframe? But, there's also the possibility of PSVR 2 stuff showing up, a dedicated state of play for God of War. PlayStation is so hard to judge nowadays with these things because there's really, historically, we no longer have that to look back on, right? Because it's just they kind of do their own thing. So it's more a matter of when, not if, but that's still a very exciting prospect that God of War is on time to release this year. Now, another game that got rated, not nearly as exciting as God of War, but something I'm still cautiously optimistic of, is Forspoken. That game was rated in Europe. It got a PEGI 18 rating, and that's the same deal here where, that title has a confirmed release date of October 11th, which that was from, May? They delayed it from May into October, so we should have had the game by now, but either way, it seems like that title is also on track to release as well. Yeah, not nearly as exciting, but again, I'm cautiously optimistic of it. It still looks pretty and looks like it might be very fun in terms of traversal and going around that landscape, and the combat is where it looks a little iffy, but we'll see, right? So that game is on track to come out this year as well. Now, moving on to our next game. This one already had a rating in Korea, if I remember correctly, but this time it had a placeholder date put on the PSN backend. I'm, of course, talking about the 2022 Game of the Year, Stray. So over on Twitter, as spotted by @JustinXRubin and posted by the PlayStation Game Size Twitter account, Stray has a tentative release date of July 19th, 2022. It could be a placeholder, but again, that game was rated recently as well, so that news has already come and gone. It's more a matter of just how soon is Stray coming out, and, guaranteed we are probably doing a platinum playthrough of that game, as long as the platinum is not egregious and weird and whatever else, but I am all hands on deck for that game. Give me some cat. Finally, for our last game, we have some news on my 2021 Game of the Year, which was Returnal. Recently on the Steam database site, a listing popped up where, at least initially, you look at it and there's nothing too revealing on there, but if you look at the localization settings, it's got nothing but Returnal stuff on there, so it mentions Atropos, the Daily Challenge, the Tower of Sisyphus, and Helios in the bottom there, in boss fight. I mean, this is Returnal. There's no hiding it, so... But that's cool to see. It was kind of expected that, more back catalog of PS Studio games are coming to PC, and boy, is that a good one. That is, without a doubt, a double dip in my opinion, but also one where, if you haven't played it just yet, grab it there, as long as it's a good, solid port. But play it there, or if not, subscribe to PS Plus Extra when it comes out, and play it there. I will always advocate for that game. So good. Next up, just as a quick little PSA here in case you did not see, but the annual Days of Play sale is back, running from May 25th to June 8th, and this is a great time to buy a number of things when it comes to PlayStation accessories, games. Also, they're running a sale on the PlayStation Gear Store if you want some merchandise, but DualSense controllers right now, like in USD, are down from 75, they're going for 60 right now. Pretty good deal, especially if you combine that with any sort of coupons or reward points at a local retail store. That's what I did. I got it down to like 45, which is really good for a brand new DualSense. But also first-party software, also discounted pretty good. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart you can get for $40 right now, so not too bad at all, right? So again, just as a quick reminder, Days of Play sale going from May 25th to June 8th. Be sure to pick something up if you are looking to buy now. Moving on to our next story, some not so good news here. If you remember from, 3 weeks ago, we had a new patch for PS3 and Vita, which required the device password setup, but that also inadvertently cut off the transfer of content from a PS3 to a PSP or Vita. And we've now got confirmation here that Sony's not going to fix that. They actually put this under the PlayStation site's service notice where they're, it's more or less cut off. They're confirming it. They're saying from May 11th, 2022, content transferred from PS3 consoles to PS Vitas is not possible. Content can still be downloaded directly to PS3 consoles or PS Vita systems, or it can be transferred using a PC. And I believe that link takes you to their content manager setup for PlayStation Vita, which that does work, but that doesn't do anything for PSP. And more so, the big problem was for PS Vita, there are certain PS1 and PSP content items that, for whatever reason, we have no idea why it was like this, but they only work on PS Vita if you transfer them over from a PS3 more or less, right? So they're not on the PS Vita store, you can't buy them, you can't download them, but if you transfer them from a PS3, then they all of a sudden work, and now they've cut that off completely. And what's really annoying about this is not so much that we're seeing, legacy services close over time. I'm well aware that's an inevitability, but what's so annoying is there was no notice ahead of time. It seems like this was a mistake, but they just thought, we couldn't warn people about this and put out a 6-12 month notice or what have you. It's just, come on, at the very least do that so people can transfer things over. But I'm also well aware of the fact that at this point in time, for a lot of people, when it comes to Vita and PS3, they're going custom firmware, and that's fine. But if you wanted to do it the official way, if you have purchases, if you like doing it the way Sony had it set up, which still was somewhat usable even today, or rather 3 weeks ago, now you can, and that's disappointing, not being given at the minimum a notice. So that was definitely a hard cutoff of a feature that we're no longer going to have or get. For our next news story, we've got something very interesting with how this played out. So, the timeline here is that last Friday, after I uploaded LTPS, the news broke out that Norman Reedus confirmed during an interview that he's working on Death Stranding 2. The weird thing, though, is that interview was not new. It was like 3 days old at the time. So basically, nobody caught this news because I guess gamers don't go to this website, which was leoedit.com. And sure enough, on May 17th on leoedit.com, they ran an interview with Norman Reedus where the interviewer says, and I quote here, "Okay, so you've got the book going on, you've got the final season coming out, then the spinoff, and you're filming Death Stranding, the video game." He says, "We just started the second one." They ask, how did that come about? He says, he provides the backstory with Guillermo del Toro and the phone call and all that. And then he says towards the bottom, the game came out and it just won all these awards. It was a huge thing. So we just started part 2 of that, which could not be more straightforward about this whole thing. I mean, there's really no arguing otherwise, especially when you look at that and combine it with what we saw last year, where again, it was Norman Reedus during an interview, and he says that they were negotiating the second game. So we went from last year, negotiation, to green light. We're starting the second one, and we're already working on it. Then we also saw Hideo Kojima on Twitter more or less acknowledge this day of, where he says, "Go to your private room, my friend," and he's got the Walking Dead bat, and it looks like he's about to let him have it, but they're good old pals in the end, which is so heartwarming to see. But yeah, I mean, we just had Norman Reedus effectively let out this news that we've got another major AAA PS Studios game coming, because Sony does own this IP, right? So it's not like they aren't funding it to some degree, or they're not greenlighting it in some way. Perhaps they will hand off the PC release again, but considering they're doing more PC releases, I also wouldn't be surprised if they want to put it on PC themselves. Be that as it may, he totally took away any sort of fanfare Sony would ever have about doing a formal reveal of this project, assuming that it does, develop on time and no cancellation or anything like that. But seems like we'll be doing a lot of waiting until we do see that. But hey, I mean, I love the first game. I do. It very much is the epitome of you either love it or you hate it, and there's not much in between. And I was on the I love it side, so by all means, sign me up. I am ready to go. And this also does not mean he can't do another project. We know Kojima Productions has more than one game going. It's just now we finally know one of them is Death Stranding 2 coming from PlayStation Studios. Moving on to one of our bigger stories this week, it was Sony's 2022 business segment briefing, which this used to be called their IR Day, which is more or less when each segment of Sony Group goes over the business, what they're planning on doing, their growth vectors, all that, all that stuff. And we knew this was coming, and so it's finally here. The SA President and CEO Jim Ryan did the presentation for the games and network services, and we've got a lot of stuff to go over for this, so we're going to more or less kind of go through this slide by slide for some of the most pertinent information. But we'll start off with what was most notable. I mean, a good portion of the presentation was simply focused on explaining how PS5 thus far is on track to be their biggest platform ever, comparing it to PS4, and offering a number of metrics like the demand and rate of sale. Interest in PlayStation right now is at an all-time high. And that goes for the brand recognition, which still ranks in the top 10 in terms of overall globally recognized brands. PlayStation is number 7. Engagement is also at an all-time high in a number of categories ranging from monthly active user retention, hours played, and life-to-date store transactions. Of course, one area Sony has fallen short is console supply. Jim Ryan outlines a new timetable here where during year 3, PS5 is expected to close the sales gap between PS4's rate of sale, and year 4, they're expecting PS5 will then overtake it again. So it will be quite a while, but year 4, they do expect PS5 will overtake PS4's rate of sale. The short-term risks include COVID-19's continued impact, but they're evaluating sourcing multiple part suppliers as a way to mitigate shortages. Moving on to live service titles, these games made up a quarter of PlayStation Store spend on PS4 during fiscal year 21. This is where Sony transitions to their growth vectors, broken down by commercial expansion, portfolio expansion, and audience expansion. For commercial, the highlight here is PlayStation VR 2. It's confirmed during this slide that there's more than 20 major first-party and third-party titles coming to PSVR 2 on launch day. Portfolio expansion covers merger and acquisition. Sony once again talks about all of their activity here and how many of these fill a role that Sony was lacking in, like Bungie. They even provide a timetable of how Bungie will fit into SIE, showing that within 12 months after the deal closes, Bungie will be fully integrated into SIE and their live service plans. We're also seeing a huge bump in investment for new IP. By fiscal year 25, half of PlayStation Studios' investments will directly go into new IP. Also, as we've heard before, a big portion of these investments will go towards new live service titles. This slide shows a breakdown of just how much money comes from digital add-on content and what it's expected to do over time. SIE will be leveraging this accordingly. By fiscal year 25, live service investment will account for 55% of PlayStation Studios. This is broken down further by showing the number of titles tentatively scheduled. Apparently we'll see 2 live service games before fiscal year 2022 ends, making the total 3, and we'll have 12 by the end of fiscal year 2025. For audience expansion, Sony is expecting tremendous growth in net sales from PC releases in fiscal year 2022, so basically there's going to be a number of PC ports coming very soon. In terms of mobile, a lot is happening behind the scenes, from co-development with existing leaders in the mobile space to building out new internal teams. With this and PC, Sony expects they'll account for half of the releases by fiscal year 25, the other half going to PlayStation 5. So, with all that, what are some of the key takeaways here? Most notably, as we often say with this topic, and especially when it comes to multiplayer, live service, mobile, PC releases, it doesn't mean less AAA single-player games on PS5. It never did. There's no indicators of that here still. These are growth vectors for the company, as in more things on top of what they were doing. Now, one could argue they would take that money and invest it back into what they're so good at, but, well, they're already doing that. You just don't want all the other things and all that money pushed into the AAA single-player games. But the reality is that, the Sony group is a business. They want to, enter new markets and start generating a lot of healthy cash flow in those areas as well, and they'll use other sectors or other segments to make that happen. So be that as it may, you don't necessarily have to worry about losing, the AAA single-player games. Just ignore everything else that Sony's doing. But it is somewhat noteworthy that we have some very revealing breakdowns here, like, for example, the 20-plus titles launching on PSVR 2. 20 always seems like a nice round number for most brand new platform launches, so that's a healthy number. Good to see. It's more about the quality of them, and so that's up for debate once we have more on a PSVR 2 reveal. But when it comes to those live service games, Sony did say they expect 2 to release by the end of fiscal year 22, which means we'll have 2 brand new PlayStation live service games come out by March of next year. So actually, that could be a number of things. I think the safest bets right now would be either that Twisted Metal project, Last of Us Factions, or Helldivers 2, which is more than likely on the way, and that's going to be considered a live service game. So it could be that, right? But yeah, we should be seeing these titles fairly soon. And if we combine that with the number Sony put out for their PC releases, they expect massive growth with PC releases by the end of fiscal year 22, which means they absolutely have more ports coming, or perhaps we will see a day-and-date live service game, which that seems to be the one scenario where it seems realistic that Sony would do a day-and-date release on, let's say, PS5, PC, or PC, PS4, PS5, whatever the case may be. But that might seem very probable if they are looking at, essentially tripling the revenue in the PC space by the next, 10 or so months. So yeah, we're going to be seeing some announcements fairly soon, you would expect. At the very least, if not during this E3 timeframe, then shortly after, and of course September, where I guess historically that's the one thing where Sony's done a September showcase the last 2 years. 2020 we did have 2 showcases, but arguably that was because PS5 was launching that year. We needed at least 2 for what was a brand new platform launch, but either way, we've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline. Sony is looking relatively healthy right now. Every quarter they're still reporting very good numbers. PS5 we still see is the big problem here, where they just cannot make enough of these consoles, because even in this moment you can see just how strong the brand recognition is. You can see the demand is there, the engagement is there. I mean, and it's like that across the board, right? Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony are all reporting very good numbers right now, and that's great. We want a healthy industry, and at least for the platform holders, they're all doing really good. And Sony, their only enemy right now seems to be themselves and the supply chain issues. Moving on to PlayStation productions, we've got word that the Uncharted movie has crossed over $400 million in the box office globally, which at this point would put that movie in the upper echelon of the most successful video game adaptations ever, next to both Sonics. Sonic 2 is starting to get there. Detective Pikachu, Rampage, and Warcraft. And yeah, this movie did really well. And you know what? I thought it was good. Not outstanding. And yes, I would still prefer, an older Drake and a really old Sully, just like the games, and stay more true to the games. But this still was fine. I really enjoyed it. And perhaps this says more about, just how Hollywood loves Tom Holland and even Mark Wahlberg, right? I mean, I'm not sure how well, that alternate timeline would have looked like if we got a more traditional Uncharted movie, or that looks more like the games, and maybe you had two lesser-known actors. I mean, I don't really know, but at the very least, this was the first successful release out of PlayStation Productions, and we are going to see a lot more as our next news story is evident, because during the business segment meeting, one thing that was confirmed I believe this was in the Q&A, is that Sony more or less confirmed outright that the rumored God of War TV series with Amazon Prime, confirmed that's coming, and also Horizon is coming as a Netflix series as well, and then also Gran Turismo, and they didn't say anything about where that TV show is going. And I believe they said TV show because on top of that, Deadline is reporting that there's a Gran Turismo movie in the works as well. So we've got 4 projects announced more or less in a day, and that's already on top of, well, if you remember a while ago, the number we were given for PS Studios projects was 10, and that sounded like a lot at the time, but now we actually have a pretty good breakdown of that number, where we've got the Uncharted movie, Ghost of Tsushima, possibly Jak and Daxter, The Last of Us HBO, Twisted Metal on Peacock, God of War on Amazon Prime, Horizon on Netflix, and Gran Turismo now is a TV show and or a movie. So there's a lot going on. Gran Turismo could be anything, obviously, because there's nothing to emulate from the games per se, so that could be anything. Horizon and God of War would be fairly predictable on what they should look like, but between both of those games, yeah, the immediate concern is they need a big budget for what is such a action-heavy, larger-than-life sort of scale going on in those universes. Especially for Horizon with the intricate, robotic fauna throughout that world, right? So that would be my concern. But I mean, if they're good, they're good, right? Based off the Uncharted movie, it was they put the resources and the budget into it. They made something that many people did enjoy. I'm still staying cautiously optimistic. I have reservations about certain IP and how well they're going to translate, but so far they're in full force. So it'll be interesting to see these projects finally come to fruition and we start watching them over time to get a better idea of, well, the quality of them. Now, I'm sure a lot of you probably saw this. It was all over Twitter, where TCL Technology, the manufacturer of TCL TVs, they recently held a press event where they were showcasing or talking about their, new upcoming products and display technologies. And when they were talking about these things, they had a slide more or less trying to sell people on the idea of why you would need, let's say, 8K within the next 3-4 years. And one of those slides was showcasing game consoles and their display technologies for the respective years. So you can see in 2013, you've got 1080-30 for PS4 and Xbox One. Then you've got the mid-cycle update for Xbox One S and X and PS4 Pro doing UHD, some form of UHD, right, but a lot of reconstruction methods. And then going into the most recent console lineup, PS5, Series X and S, and how they can do 4K 30 or 1080 120. But they also have another slide or another part of that presentation that says Gen 9.5 with PS5 Pro and a new Xbox Series console that can do possibly upwards of 8K 60 or 8K 120, and that's slated for 2023 to 2024, somewhere around there. Now, if it wasn't obvious, TCL does not know anything. They would be breaking some serious NDAs, or at the very least would be in huge trouble with Sony and Microsoft right now. This is them more or less throwing something out there as a guess because they're using a timeline of what's very public information. And a rough timeline at that, considering we only ever had one mid-cycle update in the same veins of PS4 Pro and, an X1X, right? So it's not necessarily a safe bet to even assume we're getting a mid-cycle update, but they're more or less just throwing something out there for what is their own interests and trying to sell people, 8K technology and trying to convince people that, hey, you're going to need 8K by, basically next year or within the next 2 years. But I think we all know that seems too soon and ridiculous to even humor the idea of PS5 Pro or a new Xbox with basically just increased power to do higher display resolutions, or even, let's say, ray tracing for all games or something like that. Even that seems far too soon given the supply shortage, the cost it would be to make those consoles, and as I've argued before, we may not even get a mid-cycle update this time around just because the diminishing returns, how expensive those boxes would be. And also, I think the biggest argument is that if you do a PS5 Pro, you're taking away what a PS6 can do. I mean, consoles are alive and well. We're obviously going to get a PlayStation 6. I don't find that to be a wild argument to make. And so you can't necessarily do a PS5 Pro. You're taking away what a PlayStation 6 can do in a world of diminishing returns, right? So you kind of want to leave a lot of room open there for selling a PlayStation 6 when the time comes. But be that as it may, even if it doesn't come, and I'm not saying it's impossible per se, just that even if a PS5 Pro does come, TCL does not know, and I don't think it would come in even 2024 if we're being realistic. Next up, one story that was highly publicized this week was actually something from a book that was released in 2021, which was from Stephen L. Kent. It's his book called The Ultimate History of Video Games, Volume 2, and in that book, there was they mentioned how for the head of Marvel Games, Jay Ong, he was looking to terminate the deal with Activision for all those Spider-Man games that they were putting out between, around the 2010s, early 2000s, right? They were doing a lot of those, and they wanted to terminate that contract and try to find a better home for Spider-Man. And apparently, Jay approached both Sony and Microsoft, and that's something where Microsoft said no because they wanted to focus on their own IP, which was back in 2014 at the time when this came to fruition. And they went to Sony, and of course Sony, signed on right away. They went all in. They approached Insomniac Games, of course, and said, how do you feel about working on a licensed property instead of a new IP? And that's where the team talked it out and whatnot. And of course, today we have the 2018 Spider-Man, which did incredibly well. So this was kind of an old thing, but it was making the rounds online, and so totally worth bringing up because it's always interesting to hear about these things behind the scenes. It's not always something where, a manufacturer steps in and money hats projects and, kind of pays to keep it away from other platforms. Oftentimes, every player is approached and two say no and one says yes, right? It really is that simple. And Sony was, they were very eager to take on that job, and Insomniac, of course, was really excited to get behind the project as well, and they did a fantastic, knockout job. And also, it turns out when Marvel terminated their contract with Activision had asked, okay, so what are you going to do with the IP now? Marvel said they wanted to find a better home for it, and Activision said, good luck finding your unicorn, which they took it to one of the most well-known unicorns in this business, and sure enough, they did something pretty incredible with it. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. You can follow the link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories that I wanted to talk about you all from this past week. And as I explained earlier, on Monday and Tuesday, we had some new PS Plus relaunch coverage. So looking at those features, the PS1 games, all that good stuff, go check it out. Coming up, of course, we have, also the Japanese launch of the new PS Plus relaunch, but also we are getting so close to that new E3 time frame, right? So whether Sony does or does not participate, there's still going to be a lot of stuff coming up, and that's always exciting. So until then, that's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.